When I was little, my father was famous. He was the greatest samurai in the empire. He cut off the heads of 131 lords.
Hey everybody, Jerry Williams, aka Greater Sapien here. Thanks for stopping by. So here's the thing. I'm home, chilling, rehabbing my new knee, doing my PT, recharging my batteries, and some globe denier hits me up in my comment pages saying, man, the Globebusters just destroyed me in a live broadcast. Now, I know nothing about this because I don't follow globe deniers online. So the guy gives me the info, and apparently on their July 4th live video, they decided to attack my rockets working in space video. Maybe it was a rockets red glare theme, I don't know. But they decided to play my video and stop and comment through the whole thing. And I could have let it go, but it was just so insultingly stupid, in addition to being just insulting, that I couldn't let it pass. Now, I know this might turn into a hall of mirrors type situation, but I'm going to do the same thing. Play their video, commenting on my video, and then I'll comment on what they say. For the most part, I'll skip some inane nonsense or if it gets overly repetitive. Then afterward, I'm going to go through the comment thread exchange we had after I saw this video. So this is going to be a long one. Now, let's get to their video. Right off the bat, the first host, I honestly haven't bothered to learn these fools' names, and I don't watch their videos, so I don't know their voices. So the first guy who pulls up the video starts off his scientific critique by claiming I'm a thief that stole from my viewers. Now, a lot of people ask me why I don't sue people like these losers for slander if it's not true, which it is not. And the answer is, in order to sue these fools, I would have to show that what they have said has somehow harmed me in some way. And the fact is, there is nothing that a few dumbass globe deniers can say that can cause me harm because no one in their right mind takes anything they say seriously. And no one in my personal or professional life would ever have anything to do with them, so they can't harm me. They comment on the graphics, which is perfectly fine. The fact is I made them children-level graphics because these globe deniers are child-level thinkers.
Did you know that there are people online that believe the moon landings and all the photos of the Earth are fake?
No.
And they support this idea in the comment threads by claiming that travel to the moon is not possible and having satellites in deep space taking photos is not possible. Because rockets don't work in space. They claim
because satellites don't produce any photos. That's let's start there. Where are all those photos from satellites?
Yeah, where are they? Exactly.
We got data sets aplenty. I can make data sets. Where are the photographs?
Right off the bat, they ask, where are the photos? And they say that there are data sets, as if photos from the Himawari 8 or weather satellites or the ISS, which is a satellite, don't produce any photos. Only data sets, says number 2. Now, technically, the photos taken from our phones, the video you are looking at right now, is just a stream of data of the input registered by the light sensors on the camera, interpreted by the computer and displayed in this format we call a photo or a video. But that's not NASA, so it's okay to call that a photo.
Yep, and even NASA says straight up, we don't have any photographs. You know? It's all CGI. It's Photoshop, but it has to be.
This comment from Buster number 1 is a great example of their limited ability to think. This comment is based on a statement made in 2012 by the designer who put together the Blue Marble 2002 image. In his statement, Robert Simon explains that back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were no satellites with cameras at far enough distance to capture the entire Earth. And there had not been since the Apollo missions in the 70s. So the only way to capture the entire Earth was in segments and then piece them together. On top of that, the goal of the project he was involved in was to have a model that they could rotate, zoom in on, turn on and off the clouds. And there is no way to do such a thing without taking a series of composites and wrapping them around a 3D model. It was Photoshop because it had to be for the project at that time. This was a man in 2012 talking about a project done in 2002, yet this so-called Globebuster is a man in 2021 talking about a project in 2002 as if it applies to the state of affairs today. Is that how a person who is interested in an accurate depiction of science speaks? No. No, it is not.
So the first thing he's going to do is he's going to start out basically with, almost a straw man argument.
That is a straw man. That's not, that's not the argument. That's not really the argument.
I like how they say it's almost a straw man and how it's not really the argument. It seems they've decided to make up their own definition of straw man here, because I don't say that claim 1 here is the only position that rocket deniers take. The fact that it says claims plural is a clue. But a straw man is a claim that I make up for you. That isn't a claim you make. If you make the claim, it's no kind of straw man, even if you make more than that claim.
But
no,
I mean,
not at
it's
all.
an ancillary thing that's true, but it's not the argument.
He just said it's an ancillary thing that is true. Well, hey, Buster number 2, you just made the claim. So I guess it wasn't a straw man after all.
That's right.
The argument has to do with Newton's laws of motion.
That's right.
All right. Anyway, let's continue.
But because it's something that requires him to be shown in the affirmative, right? Then automatically he's going to be right on everything else. But so this kind of sets the tone, right? This is an easy one to debunk. I don't really know anybody that has said, well, because rockets don't have any oxygen, that you can't, obviously they have an oxidizer, right? So I don't know anybody flat earth.
You don't know anyone? Really, Buster number 1? Number 2 just said it was true like 30 seconds ago. Did you not hear that? Anyway, you're right, though, that this is an easy one to cover. That's why I did it first. The fact is, if I had only made the video based on Newton's third law, someone, probably one of these fools, would say, but you still need to have oxygen. So while it might be a less important point when it comes to this discussion, this is called being thorough. I know it's a hard concept for you to wrap your minds around, but it's what serious people do. Now, some of you might notice a slightly more disrespectful tone from me than normal, and that's because I don't have any respect to give these guys. Look, it's fine that you don't agree with my facts here, but the fact that you can't deal with my statements themselves without resorting to calling me retarded and attacking my character tells me you are unworthy of respect. Buster number 2, whoever you are, fuck you, you internet coward. Now, I'm going to skip over most of the claim 1 section because what they do is pretty much ignore what I'm saying because I'm right and make arguments targeting claim 2. So we'll just go to that.
All right, so let's look at that really quick right there. The mutual actions of two bodies upon each other, okay? Well, when you say bodies, you imply something physical, right? And
a vacuum being the very definition of the lack of a body.
Precisely. And we haven't even gotten into the free expansion gas law yet, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we still got a long ways to go on this because we are going to completely rip this apart. He is so wrong on so many levels. It's beyond belief.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah, it is. So let's keep going.
Now here they assume that the only things involved here are the rocket and the vacuum of space, completely ignoring the body that is the combusting fuel.
Casually stated as, to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This means when you exert a force on an object in one direction, that object exerts an equal force upon you in the opposite direction. Swimmers going through water exert a backward force on the water, and the water
doesn't exert another
forward.
Force. It's the reaction. It's not exerting another force. Oh, God.
Planes, helicopters, and birds exert force on the air, and the air pushes them up and in whatever direction they wish to travel.
No, it doesn't push them. Oh, God.
But rockets in space...
Listen to all that hemming and hawing. Not really an argument, just an expression of incredulity. You might have noticed that he started, I think it was Buster number 2 again, to make a semantic argument that the water isn't exerting another force, as if that's what I had said. And he says, it's the reaction, it's not exerting another force, which is semantics because the result is the same, which he knows to be the case, but he feels the need to criticize something. Because I didn't say that there was another force, did I?
Rockets in space aren't in a medium like...
I know this, honestly, this whole thing is a comedy of errors, but I'm just going to focus, primarily because he's going to go back ultimately, and we're going to tear apart, the part where he says that there is something there to provide reaction to, right? Which there isn't, first of all, because that would imply physicality, but then they're going to claim that it is the exhaust gases themselves that are the physical part, which of course is complete nonsense. Because the exhaust...
This is NASA argument that the exhaust gas is pushing against the nozzle is what creates a thrust. It's like, that's preposterous.
It is.
It couldn't be more circuitous. It's ridiculous.
Now, we'll see later on that I replied to them that their argument was basically nuh-uh. And that tactic is well underway here. They say the fuel being the body is preposterous, but don't back it up. That's saying nuh-uh. They're saying the argument is circuitous, but they don't say how. That's nuh-uh.
Yep. So, yeah, we'll both have plenty of time to hit this from all directions, but let's continue.
Like air or water, and thus have nothing to push off of, is the claim. And again, the answer is rockets contain their own medium to push on, in the form of the fuel they combust.
Wrong.
Oh, God, that's not even the right argument. I mean, no, that's not even the right argument, dude.
Well, where he's going, let me tell you where he's going to go with this, right? Ultimately, he's going to say, and he's going to give the example of a person,
the medicine ball in this
the
case,
medicine ball, exactly, right? You know what? Let's just
it's just wrong.
Yeah, let's just play it through and then we'll hit it, because there's so many things that are so wrong on this.
But I'm just going with his statement right there. The statement, and it's probably, he would say, "Oh, I misspoke," but he says in the form of its own fuel, that the fuel is the medium against which it pushes off. It's like, no, that's not the art. That's not what they're saying. What they're saying is ridiculous, but that's not even what they're saying. He doesn't even understand. Whatever.
Nope.
What argument was actually made here? I heard ridiculous being thrown about, but not actual support for that statement. That's nuh-uh.
Okay.
All right, so let's play it through.
Thousands of bad comments. Like he's got way more subscribers than I do. It doesn't. I guess that just shows how silly people are if they believe it. Because this doesn't even make sense.
Well, no, we can easily debunk this. Not a problem. Let's continue.
When the fuel is ignited in the combustion chamber, it creates a tremendous amount of pressure as the fuel converts into gas and rapidly expands. The rocket provides only one path of escape for the expanding gases, and as those gases are forced out...
This guy's killing me. Creates a tremendous amount of pressure. Okay, pressure. What that implies, pressed, something to press upon. If there's nothing against to press upon, there is no pressure.
That's right. You got the fourth wall that's wide open.
Now, this is interesting because he's saying this is number 2 again. By the way, wasn't there a third guy here? Wasn't there a third little turd floating around earlier in this video? Anyway. Number 2 is saying that pressure has to have something to press upon. And since there is an opening there, there's nothing to press upon, which is funny because it's almost as if he thinks expanding gases are magic and don't try to push out in all directions. Like it's a mindful creature that says, this is the only way out. Don't touch anything. Just calmly exit through the rear. We all know how stupid that sounds, right?
Right. Yep. And not only do you have the fourth wall wide open, but outside of it exists a gas condition where even if you didn't have anything pushing that gas out, it would be drawn out just because of the normal atmosphere pressure that's inside of it, right? You're talking about a 10 to the negative 17 torr environment to the outside. Nothing is going to remain in that chamber.
And here's where they get their basics mixed up. Deniers like these guys, for some reason, feel the need to give agency to a near vacuum. The gases will be drawn out, they say. In their mind, it's like the space is coaxing the gases out, when in fact the gases are expanding out. There is an action happening on the part of the igniting fuel.
This is what we call the free expansion of gas law, right? In other words, when you release this gas fuel, this rocket fuel into a vacuum or into free space, right? It will go there all by itself. It doesn't have to be pushed there. And when it goes there all by itself by the free expansion of gas law, then there is no work done. And when
the only work done is the complete disambiguation of whatever the container is, in which there would be this immense pressure differential. That's the only work done. Is it would blow up immediately anything that had pressure inside of it in a 10 to the minus 17 torr vacuum. I don't even believe that exists. It's a lie. There is no 10 to the minus 17 torr vacuum. We can't create one. We can't get past, 10 to the minus 11, 10, 11, something like that.
I know.
On Earth.
But hey, we got to go with their numbers, right?
Okay, I'm going to get to their misinterpreting of the free expansion gas law later on, but let me quickly address this recurring reference to 10 to the negative 17 torr they keep repeating for some reason. The known pressure of space in low Earth orbit at 500 kilometers is about 7.5 to 10 to the negative 11 torr. The pressure on the moon during the day is about 10 to the negative 15 torr. Now, you busters may have looked up on Wikipedia that the lowest pressure ever made in a lab was 10 to the negative 12, but you probably didn't notice that the value was shown in pascals, not torr, and that 10 to the negative 12 pascals is closer to 10 to the negative 15 torr. So, 1, the pressure of space outside a rocket in local space would not be 10 to the negative 17 torr, so shut up. And 2, yes, we have made the types of vacuum that a rocket would experience in a lab here on Earth. So everything you guys just said was bullshit based in your own ignorance. And you said it with such pride.
So the only work being done would be the complete dissolution of whatever material that had pressure inside it. After that, everything would disperse into the available space, which what we're told is infinity. And so those particulate matter would go everywhere instantly. That's the only
right.
work that would be done.
Instantly? Really? What fact is that based on? What makes you say offhand that it is not possible for gases to be regulated in any way?
So the people that will try and debunk this, what they will do then is they will come back and they'll show somebody lighting off a pop bottle rocket or a small rocket motor inside of a box that's been evacuated. But the problem is what they are not understanding is that as soon as they do that and they're putting all those gases in there, then all of a sudden they're creating a medium, right? They're creating the very medium that is allowing it to press off of. And they're saying, yeah, that's exactly what we're saying. It's like, no,
that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not going to call it a straw man argument because he's not attributing it to me. But I will say that that's not my position.
Because that is in a contained environment. That space is this infinite vacuum, right? And there's nothing that is going to allow any accumulation of gas, period.
Well, exactly. And so, again, to Bob's point, what we're saying here, right, is expressly is that any thrust created by a rocket, no matter how much that is, would be infinitely completely obviated by the energy created by the complete dissolution of material into an infinite vacuum at 10 to the minus 17 torr.
I have to point out that sentence made zero sense. The thrust, no matter how large, would be obviated and removed by the energy created by the dissolution of the material into space. Big words that technically make up a sentence, but that says nothing of value.
That the amount of thrust would be insignificant in comparison. Again, just go watch a video of a tanker, right, being collapsed with, hundreds of orders of magnitude less pressure differential. It's all about the pressure differential. It doesn't take very much to cause a 1-inch thick titanium steel tanker to completely collapse on itself. That's just tiny bit of pressure differential. Why do you think there's a crush depth in submarines? It's only like 150 to 300 meters, right? 10 to the minus 17 torr. Come on. So any thrust that would be created, it doesn't matter, would be completely sucked into oblivion in an empty vacuum of space. It's nonsense.
Okay, this is another interesting one because they want to have it both ways. They want to claim that not much pressure differential will crush a sub at 300 meters, though I'd say that the difference of 735 torr at the surface and 22,000 torr underwater is pretty big. They want to say that the differential will create a tremendous amount of force, but the differential in space won't. Now, I know it's because they're saying that the force of the vacuum in space will overcome and negate the force of the expansion of gases, but that's because they, one, again, are trying to give agency to space. It's sucking and negating the force. And 2, they are switching roles of the force to suit their desires. With the tanker, or the sub, the higher pressure is exerting force and crushing. They never say the low-pressure tanker sucks itself flat. do they? But when it comes to space, space is suddenly the action maker here, not the expanding fuel, which is the higher pressure. Why the change? Now, we all know that if the fuel was ignited in this rocket with no exit, the pressure would explode this thing into a million pieces, throwing them all outward with a great deal of force, right? But according to what they've proposed, the moment an opening was formed, like a crack, the gases would have nothing to push off of because there's an exit now. And the tremendous sucking energy of space would just negate all the exploding force as the gas freely expands into space. It is drawn into space instantly. How does that make sense? It doesn't. No, in reality, the expanding gases that have enough force to push the rocket into a million pieces now pushes the rocket in mass in the opposite direction of the gas's escape. Space doesn't do anything. That's the thing they can't get their minds around. Space is sucking to them, which is false. Space is doing nothing. Gases are expanding into space.
Yep, exactly. So let's continue on, because he's going to bring the old, we're bringing the mass with us argument here. So here we go.
Out of one end of the rocket, they in turn exert a force on the rocket in the opposite direction. While this is straightforward, some have continued to express a need for an exterior medium to be involved. So I propose this thought experiment. Picture a person on roller skates facing a secured brick wall.
He didn't propose this,
On
somebody
the brick
else.
Wall, they roll away.
And he's a
from it.
plagiarist as well.
Interesting that he says, I didn't propose this and that I'm a plagiarist, when in fact, I did propose this. I developed this concept myself here. Am I the first to make this type of proposal? I wouldn't presume so. It is, after all, the 21st century. But I am the first I've heard say this particular setup. And number two has no evidence to the contrary, so he can just go fuck himself again.
Yes, exactly. NASA proposed this. They had a little bit different, but same thing. So let's let
But he's
him
still
get
got
it
a hard
out.
surface there. They at least did a medicine ball.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, so NASA proposed a different version of this. A different version, not this one. The one with a medicine ball, which I haven't seen. So you don't even have an example of where I would have plagiarized this from. Yeah, go fuck yourself.
And we'll I'll do my analogy on it, and then you can do yours. But I mean, this thing's dead from 6 ways from Sunday. Let's
Continue to express a need for an exterior medium to be involved. So I propose this thought experiment. Picture a person on roller skates facing a secured brick wall. If they push on the brick wall, they roll away from it. The force on the wall is causing the motion, not the air surrounding them. Unsecure the wall and push it again. The wall falls in one direction, the person rolls in the other. Break the wall into sections and push each section away. They go in one direction, the person rolls in the other. Reduce the wall to bricks and smaller pieces, and it is the force exerted against the pieces that cause the motion.
Relative
And the
to
air
the mass of
surrounding
each
them
item,
has not
how much
become an
effort
active mechanism.
I'm not sure if they expand upon this idea, but what number two said there was a comment about the amount of effort required at this point in the thought experiment. What I'm going to do is assume that he now takes issue with how small the particles have become and how little each particle will move the person. That's not a refutation. You'll notice that they said nothing about the earlier example with the large pieces. That's because they know my position is correct. Everyone knows pushing a big thing away will cause this recoil and not need the medium of air to push on. What they seek to do is argue from incredulity that how can these small particles move someone? The person would barely move, which I anticipated in my animation. When he throws the big objects, the biggest object caused the biggest result. As the objects got smaller, each toss resulted in a smaller motion until the last one, where thousands, millions of particles are being hurled, but it's not having a very much moving effect. It will take throwing the equivalent of that entire wall to get this person across the room.
Yeah, don't worry.
In the case
we'll
of a
get
rocket,
to it.
that wall is replaced by the fuel particles being propelled at an incredibly high rate, and the medium that surrounds them is not needed. In fact,
That laugh? That's nuh-uh. Not an argument, just a casual dismissal.
You're going to
Air
love
is a
this.
hindrance to a rocket's
Oh my
motion.
God.
It's a hindrance.
Picture
now.
that person on roller skates, pushing off the wall. But now, instead of rolling freely, there is a thin wall of paper in their path. There's not much resistance there, but there's enough to slow them down the slightest bit. Air acts in the same manner by providing the tiniest bit of slowing force, known as air resistance or drag, on whatever is passing through it.
Oh my God.
Again, they laugh. A casual dismissal. Are they trying to claim that air resistance isn't a thing? I mean, what are we supposed to take from that laugh? Was that an injection of a scientific counterpoint? Did I describe something that doesn't exist in reality? No. No, I did not.
In space, however, where particles are so few and far between that it is considered a vacuum, no air resistance is encountered. And rockets...
Yeah. What few particles in space, Hero?
Bob, you're hurting me, Bob. Why are you doing this to me?
I know, it's painful.
I
We'll
get dumber
get
with
through
every
it.
minute I listen to this.
Oh, hey, there's the third little dude chiming in. Cute. They seem to take issue with the comment of there being few particles in space. Is that not a fact? What did I say that is hurting them other than things they can't dispute? They do know that outer space isn't a perfect vacuum, right? That there are actually particles, few and far between, in space.
We'll get to. I know. I can't even believe he went there with that. That toilet paper thing behind it, and then he actually has the audacity to say that it actually hinders it. Not only does it not work on it, but it hinders it. Right?
It just underscores the complete missing
Lunacy.
the point.
Yes.
Missing the point. He doesn't grasp the concept of even what NASA is saying. When they're trying to dance around it, he misses even that point.
Yep. Not in a million years. All right, let's let it play out. We got about another minute.
What's the point I'm missing? They say I'm missing even what NASA is saying, but oddly enough, they can't say what that is. So since they fail to support their claim, what they've done is just dismiss mine offhand.
and any other objects will move more freely than they would on Earth. Because according to Newton's first law of motion, a rocket such as this will remain in motion unless acted upon by another force. So not only can rockets work in space, my friends, they work best in space. That's all for this episode.
Another laugh. That's cool, but what I didn't hear is a refutation of what I said. Did I misuse Newton's first law? Not according to them, apparently. They couldn't manage a single word to dispute my position.
The comment thread science.
It's gotta be comedy.
Oh,
This guy is dumber than a box of rocks, guys. All right, so let me go through it. The first thing, okay, he's using a kind of a skewed version of how NASA explains it with the medicine ball, right? Mm-hmm. And they say basically if you sit on a skateboard or an office chair and you have a big medicine ball and you throw that mass away from you, it goes in one direction and you go in another, right? Well, yeah, okay, we can accept that. That's easy to buy. But the problem with that is first of all, where are you going to keep coming up with that mass? You know, they're trying to tell you that it is the gas that is making the mass, when in fact, the gas from the rocket propulsion, the rocket engine, that is creating the mass. That is not what is happening at all.
No, I think that's what he's trying to explain. I think the way NASA tries to explain it is that it is the rocket itself that is the mass, and the pressure against the nozzle is the force, and they are acting on one another. I think that's their story. Right. I think that's their story. He's not even explaining it right. That's what I'm saying.
No, he's not.
You've got it right the way he's explaining it, which is complete.
Right. Now, let me give you another analogy that works a whole lot better.
Before he gets to his analogy, which I'm certain will be grand, they speak again with incredulity about the gases creating the mass. I don't know where they are getting this creating the mass concept from. The gases aren't creating the mass. The gases are mass. A Saturn V rocket has a dry mass of 130,000 kilograms, but it carried 2.3 million kilograms of fuel. That's the mass. That's nearly 20 times its own mass in fuel alone. That's the mass that gets turned into gas, and that's what gets thrown out the end.
And we can break this down and look at it a lot more critically. All right. What he's actually describing here is a force called recoil. Okay. This recoil, if anybody has ever shot a gun, you know how it works. All right. So when you pull the trigger on the gun, the hammer hits the firing pin, which then ignites the gunpowder, which then causes a rapid gas expansion, right? And it gets to a point where it is so great that the case and the bullet separate. And the case, of course, is being held in place by the frame of the gun, which is also being held in place by your weight and your mass connected to the ground.
Exactly. It
right?
requires mass for this
It requires mass.
happen.
Right.
Here they are again talking about requiring mass, as if requiring mass means required to be secured to a solid mass. It does not. A bullet cartridge can fire if it's heated up and not secured to anything.
So what's happening here is that you look at the bullet as the rocket itself, okay? And the role of the gunpowder in the bullet is the role of the rocket fuel.
So far, so good.
Right? Firing away. That's what provides the energy. And the role of the frame of the gun and the casing on the back of it, and you holding onto the gun and you being connected to the earth, well, you then complete the equation or the mass that is required to satisfy Newton's third, something to work off of.
Nope, not correct at all. Where did they get that from Newton's third? They made that up. The role of the gun is direction and focus. The gases try to expand in all directions when they ignite. If they were to do so, that would waste a lot of energy. The gun directs that energy to make use of it. The role of the person is stability, and the earth doesn't play much of a role if the gun isn't like that big. It's the earth is for the person to stand on because that's what people do. These folks are incredibly pedestrian in their thinking. They're stuck in the mindset that since all motion, all actions and reactions that people have ever done until relatively recently have taken place while attached to the earth, that must mean that the laws of motion are connected to the earth. It's amazingly small-minded.
All right, so now what he's saying is that that the gas itself is what's causing the mass. What is the mass that is being accelerated off of? And that's not true at all.
Saying that's not true at all is just saying nuh-uh. Before he moves on, let me go back to that gun analogy because in his limited ability to think, he stopped short. He said the gunpowder was analogous to the rocket fuel for the bullet, which is true. But the gunpowder and the bullet are analogous to the rocket fuel for the gun. The escape of the exploding gases and the slug forces the gun itself backwards. The slug and the gases are not pushing off the atmosphere. No, it's just the force of the gases' expansion itself, pushing on the gun and the slug.
The rocket engine, the gas that's there is a direct analog to the gunpowder.
And here I think I see an inkling of the issue with the way number one is thinking. In the gun, there isn't much gunpowder mass. Gunpowder has a tremendous amount of energy within it without much mass. So the mass that truly recoils the gun is the slug. The gunpowder in the 9mm bullet is about 1/3 of a gram compared to the 700-gram handgun and an 8-gram slug. Rocket fuel is different. As I mentioned earlier, the mass of the fuel of a Saturn V rocket is nearly 20 times that of the rocket itself. That's the mass. It's incredibly inefficient compared to gunpowder, but it's controllable. I think they're making the mistake of assuming that since the gunpowder isn't there for its mass, really, it's just its energy, that the fuel can't be there for its mass, even though the mass to energy ratio of the substances are very different. This is because in their limited cognitive abilities, to them, a substance with certain traits acting in a role in one situation must be the same role as a different substance with totally different traits in a similar situation.
Right? Now, the problem is again, you've got the back of the rocket open. And not only that, not only do we know that it makes a big difference, the atmosphere on the rocket. And the reason for that is because they have an optimum aperture of the rocket engine itself, the venturi, right? So what they do is they have to squeeze it down. It's kind of like putting your finger over a hose so that it shoots it out a lot faster, right? That's the venturi effect. And there is an optimal, they tune these things for high altitude. mostly because that's where they need it the most, when they get up, into the high altitudes, because of the fact that rocket engines are not very efficient up there. That is why they are tuned for high altitude. Of course, did he mention that? No, not at all. Did not mention it at all.
You know why I didn't mention it? Because it doesn't matter. You notice how he mentions this need for having this optimal size, but not how it negates what I said. He just points out something that I didn't mention, implying that I didn't mention it because it counters my position. But it in no way does. That's why he doesn't get specific and just leaves it out there.
The other thing that is a huge problem is that when you look at it in terms of taking mass with you and casting that mass out, well, first of all, you have to have at least as much mass, right, that you're casting away. You have to have more, honestly, but at least as much to make a legitimate offset, right, for you to be propelled in one direction or the other. But what you showed him is like he's grabbing a piece of the wall, right, and then throwing it, grab a piece on the wall. But the problem is you have to carry that mass with you. And again, this is where they are trying to lead you down a road by saying that no, it's the gas expanding that is creating the mass.
Stop. Where is this creating the mass coming from? You just said it. They have to carry that mass with them. Is the fuel not mass? Is the 2.3 million kilograms of fuel not mass? Are they not carrying that mass with them as you just said they needed to? When the fuel ignites and goes from, say, liquid to gas, that gas is not created mass. It's mass that's already there going from one state of matter to another. And that mass that is already there is being discarded. Stop with this creating the mass bullshit, dude.
And I do not give a crap what you say. There is no way that gas expanding, even at the rates that they're saying that it does, is going to give you anything to work off of. It's point blank impossible.
This is just them saying, nuh-uh again. I don't give a crap what you say is again an argument from incredulity. He's saying it's impossible. Says who? Based in what science? He doesn't say. He just says, nuh-uh.
Right.
Yeah, there's so many problems. I mean, again, even his analogy of the wall, right? And he breaks it down into smaller pieces. Those constituent parts. Again, your motion would be relative to the mass of the wall if it were connected to the ground, right? So the second one, it's not connected, it falls down. But he's saying each of those little ones, the smaller the mass, the less the recoil, the less the work done. It means that you're not going to go as far. So he neglects that part because I don't think.
Right.
No, I don't neglect that part. I animated things the way I did just for that point. While it is true that the amount of recoil motion imparted by the throwing of the smaller particles is less, there is still the accumulated effect of all those particles. This is the conservation of momentum that they are forgetting here. It does not matter how small the particle, how small the mass is. If you add energy to that mass, if you add momentum to that mass in one direction, that momentum has to be balanced by momentum in the main body changing in the opposite direction. Let's go back to that wall in our minds, okay? If I'm holding that entire mass of that wall and I hurl it as hard as I can, putting as much momentum as possible into it, the equivalent momentum will be added to me in the opposite direction, and I will slide back as far as that takes me. Now, say I am holding the entire mass of that wall in brick form or in particle form, and I'm able to hurl each one of those bricks at full strength continually until I've thrown the entire wall. I'm adding momentum to each one of those bricks, those particles, though not as much, and for each one I hurl, my momentum is changing in the opposite direction. The equal amount. I'm not moving much, but I'm moving until at some point I've thrown the entire wall, and the resulting momentum has moved me back as far as if I threw the entire wall at once. It just took a while. For some reason, they think that if you do a big action, conservation of momentum counts, but with small actions, it doesn't. It's just impossible to them.
Now, Systems Planet in the chat says, I must be dumb. I agree with NASA on this one. The gas expelling out the back would exert a force. Exert a force on what, Systems Planet? That's the question.
It has to exert a force on something, for one.
Yes, and that something is the rest of the rocket. Why is that so hard for these guys to wrap their heads around?
And the
Right.
other thing, if you are going to go with the NASA story, and I don't, then you have to accept there's a 10 to the minus 17 torr vacuum, right, into which that exhaust is going. Well, the pressure differential of that trying to basically suck of that gas expanding into a 10 to the minus 17 torr vacuum is far greater than whatever thrust it would be. It would be insignificant, non-consequential, because the pressure differential against the entire rocket itself would cause it to completely disambiguate instantly.
What science is that based on? They are still of the mind that the vacuum of space is doing something.
It wouldn't even exist. 10 to the minus 17 torr vacuum cannot exist, and nothing can
Exactly.
exist in it.
They're
Nature
trying-
abhors a vacuum. What part of this have physicists forgotten?
I already went over this part. The pressure outside the rocket in local space isn't 10 to the negative 17 torr, and the claim that nothing could exist in it is something you just made up.
Exactly.
I mean, we've known this since the time of Plato, for crying out loud. Nature abhors a vacuum, and it's just poking you in the eye to say that most of the universe is a vacuum. That's
right.
nature.
All of that mass would be drawn out instantaneously, even without any thrust behind it.
Absolutely.
Because of the pressure differential, right?
Absolutely.
Again, drawn out is giving agency to the vacuum, which is something that they are just making up.
And so for anybody to assume that that mass of gas is going to stay in one place long enough where you can actually build up enough resistance against it that it can propel the entire mass of the rocket, which is massive, forward in space, you're out of your mind. There's no way that it can happen.
This is just them saying, nuh-uh, they can't believe it. They aren't supporting their position with anything here. They are saying that the rocket can add momentum to part of itself and hurl it away and not have to balance that momentum in any way. They are saying that space, which is nothing and has no momentum of its own, can somehow add negative momentum to the system in such a way for the gases to go off at a high velocity and for nothing else to move. What science is that based on?
There are so many problems. That's the thing about this. And this is why, from the beginning, Bob, this is why I say I have a tendency, my general rule is I don't play chess with pigeons, right? Because they just like this guy, right? They flap their wings and shit all over the board, knock over the pieces, and flap away and tell everybody they've won, right? And you're sitting there going, what? You don't even understand the game, right? This is what we've got here. He doesn't even understand the rules of the game, and he's telling everybody he's won. I'd rather work with you and Cammie to try to figure out the nature of the world, right? It's like, these guys are silly. And the cognitive dissonance is so over the top. It's like they just have to make stuff up to make their story be true. And it's just not.
Yep. That was an amazing amount of projection because unlike them, I have gone through step by step and shown you how they have just made stuff up. They have literally not shown an understanding of physics at all during this entire video.
That's absolutely true. So again, they have false equivalencies, in what they're comparing it to. Like I said, the gunpowder is the direct analog to the rocket fuel, right? And that's all fine and dandy. Now, when the rocket is on the Earth, what provides Newton's third? What provides the conditions for Newton's third law on Earth? Well, obviously, the ground does.
Says who? Where in Newton's laws is there any connection to the ground? Nowhere. This is a limitation on Newton's laws that they made up.
Right? That's why rockets take off, well,
Until
except for NASA rockets.
From the ground, right? Yeah.
Right.
And
Except for
then it has to
NASA
be air
rockets.
pressure. Yeah.
Most rockets accelerate much faster, away from the ground than NASA rockets, but not NASA rockets. They're just rocket balloons,
They're
essentially.
magic.
Yeah.
Magic.
I'm sorry, that made no sense. Most rockets accelerate faster away from the ground, except NASA rockets? They're balloons? What does that even mean? If most rockets accelerate faster away from the ground, how is the ground what is needed for Newton's third law? That was like an odd reflex where they saw an opportunity to criticize NASA because it's always about NASA for some reason with these fools. And in doing so, they let go of the narrative thread of being connected to the Earth as being important. And that's because since they are just making all this stuff up ad hoc, there's no internal logic to it. What's true is what they say in the moment as long as it's criticizing their opposition.
But so, and then you have a 14.7 psi pressure gradient that you are working against. But by the time you get up to 100,000 feet, you know what? It's almost gone.
When they are down low, there's a pressure gradient that they're working against. Now, I know what they're trying to say, but what they're actually describing is air resistance. It's that air resistance that they laughed at earlier. And when the air gets thinner, it gets easier to move through. Now, what these guys want to say is that there's this high pressure volume of air that's like a massive wall for the rocket to push off of. And that higher up the rocket goes, the less there is to push on, so it doesn't work as well. This is literally the opposite of reality, which I will explain in a moment.
And that is exactly why that, they can't fly around very good up there. Otherwise, you would think that they would have the U-2s all outfitted nice with rockets, right? Then they could go up to 130, 140,000 feet. Why aren't they doing that? Because it's not possible and they know it.
This is the argument that if rockets work this way, then they would be used for this totally different craft that has a totally different purpose. That's not how engineering works. You engineer a craft to best do the thing you want it to do.
Right? This is why you will never see a rocket U-2, right? That'll go up to 200,000 feet or 300,000 feet, because the rocket cannot work against a lack of atmosphere, which means a lack of matter, which means a lack of mass.
It works better.
No. A winged aircraft cannot work with a lack of atmosphere. A winged aircraft like the U-2 uses its wings and atmosphere for lift and maneuvering. Without atmospheric lift beyond the Kármán line, you're basically a projectile, which is no good for a spy plane. You need to be able to maneuver.
Yeah, and he's actually going to tell us that it works better. Oh my God!
I bet Kelly Johnson would disagree. I bet Kelly Johnson didn't have much to say about NASA rockets. Kelly Johnson's the guy that developed the SR-71 with a slide rule.
Again, you're talking about a craft that has a completely different goal than a rocket, aren't you? An SR-71 needs to maneuver, which means it needs to interact with the atmosphere. It needs to make use of lift and drag in a way that a rocket does not. That friction is something it needs to engage with, and managing that is hard. But the reality is, if you watch any rocket launch for a whole stage, the thrust is constant for that stage, and you'll notice that it accelerates faster as it goes higher. It doesn't just go faster, it accelerates faster. Take the Falcon 9 launch back in December of 2020. From 20 to 30 seconds, it accelerated 200 kilometers per hour over 10 seconds. That was at 1.6 kilometers altitude. From 60 to 70 seconds, it accelerated 327 kilometers per hour in 10 seconds at 11 kilometers altitude. 100 to 110 seconds, 800 kilometers per hour in 10 seconds at 34 kilometers high. And at the end of its first stage, at 140 to 150 seconds, just before the booster cut off at 58 kilometers up, it accelerated 1,140 kilometers an hour in 10 seconds. That's because of two reasons. The craft is shedding mass while generating the same amount of thrust, and a decreasing density of atmosphere. But admittedly, it's more of the former. These are facts backed up by the data of these rockets in operation. These douchebags can deny the numbers, but that would just be them saying, nuh-uh.
If you want to spend an entertaining 45 minutes and disprove everything NASA says, just go YouTube any video. There's several of them out there that go through the development. It's just any documented development of the SR-71, and listen to Kelly Johnson describe the problems that they had with moving at that speed in the atmosphere. Right? The friction that's developed is ridiculous. There's so many problems that they, even to this day, couldn't solve.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's running at about Mach 3 that we know of. Right?
Yeah, so they're running at 3,000 miles an hour, and the friction is so high that they have to build the airplane basically like a sieve, so that when it gets that hot, it expands and then seals. And then seals all the But here's the thing: why don't they put those kind of shielding right on the top of rockets? Because they're going way faster than Mach 3. In fact, to reach escape velocity, they have to get up to Mach 33 or 25,000 miles an hour. or Mach 25, which is, of course, the 17,500 miles an hour to get up into the area of the ISS orbit. But no, we're talking orders of magnitude more.
Is ridiculous, right? They're saying like 33,000 miles an hour to get to escape velocity.
Mach 33 is 25,000 miles an hour. Yeah,
25.
exactly.
Yeah, 25. Yeah, that's right. 25,000 miles an hour. Mach 33. That's right. But yeah, it's ridiculous, right? And the friction that you would go through, the temperatures induced at that kind of friction. I don't know of any material that could do it, right? And so,
I don't know of a material that can do it is not a valid argument. And what temperatures are we talking about here? He doesn't say. Just those kinds of temperatures with that kind of friction. He is saying nothing.
How do they say they get there, right? I've kept looking at this. What do they say they make it out of? Aluminum composite. Okay, well, aluminum has a melting temperature. It's way lower than that. What?
Melting point is way lower than that? Lower than what? No data has been brought forth here, so what is he comparing? Maybe they don't know this. I'm actually quite certain that they don't know this. But except for the base of the rocket bodies run cold because they are filled with supercooled liquid fuel and oxygen. They are not really worried about the rocket heating up until it's falling empty back to Earth.
Well, what do you go slow until you suddenly get past
Well, this SR-71 is supposedly titanium, right?
Exactly. It's the titanium. But that's what I'm saying. What do they make to say what is NASA and SpaceX saying they're making the rockets out of? Look at that SpaceX piece of crap. It looks like a
now, of course,
that thing wouldn't even hold water. That stupid grain silo.
What they're going to say
wouldn't even hold water.
Now, what the detractors are going to do is they're going to come back and say, you guys are so dumb. By the time it gets that high up in the atmosphere, there's hardly any air resistance for it to, burn up against.
That's what I'm saying. You're going to go slow until you get there and suddenly go fast. It doesn't even make any sense. You have to develop momentum. It doesn't make any sense. And again, you go out and buy a model rocket, put an Estes C class rocket together and watch what happens. They're lying to you. They are lying to you.
Here they are again, just saying it's preposterous, and they, NASA and SpaceX, are lying to you. That's not a supportable claim. That's just nuh-uh.
They are. And the level of stupidity demonstrated in this video is off the chart, guys. I mean, I can't even believe that he would. I mean, not only is he wrong about everything he said, but to go even further and say that air would inhibit it and use that retarded example that he did.
There are some guys that I think are disingenuous, and I know that clearly they're lying. I don't think this guy gets it, because he doesn't even seem to understand the NASA argument. So I'm sorry, dude. I know you're going to send all your people over to be mean, but
now I can say confidently that I've shown through this video that it's these fools that don't know what they're talking about. And it's funny that they say, I'm going to send my people over to be mean, because remember, even though they came at me with personal insults for a video I made that had nothing to do with them, they are the victims here. Even though the only reason I know about this video of theirs is because one of their fluffers came to my channel saying, Globebusters demolished you, they are going to get bullied by my people. Hey, Tweedledum and Tweedledee. I don't send people. I never have. I don't follow your channel. Your fans send your videos to me. The only person I'm going to send to you is me. And that's because you decided to shit talk me. You don't like having your ass handed to you? Shut the fuck up and don't step to people you can't handle.
It's just the truth, man. Sorry, not trying to be mean. It's just the rules of physics are what they are. And the reason the laws of physics is because we observe them. We didn't make them up, right? We observe them, and they are that way because they're immutable. It's just, that's what they do, right? You can't change that because of a fairy tale or a fantasy or because you want to believe it. I'm sorry.
I agree. And yet you two have literally said nothing that shows that I've used the laws of physics incorrectly. Instead, you've created your own laws of physics, an addendum to Newton's third law that daisy chains a propellant to the earth, and a negative momentum creating property of a vacuum that negates the conservation of momentum, and a whole bunch of things that you say are just impossible or preposterous because reasons. Now, the rest of this video is just them repeating the same thing over and over and saying how stupid I am for making this video. But the experience doesn't stop here, because after I watched it, I sent them a comment saying, that was fun, guys. Maybe one day you'll have something to say other than, nuh-uh, that's not true. Now, I just went through the entire video with you, and there were at least 11 instances where what they said boiled down to nuh-uh. You were all there. Now, one of them, I don't know who, and it doesn't matter, came back with a 1,000-word comment, which, of course, is filled with a lot of character insults because attacking my argument isn't enough. I'm going to put screenshots up, and you can pause to read if you wish. And then I'll go through the attempts at substantive arguments that are in there. At the end, he warns me against pasting a bunch of YouTube videos in response, which just goes to show that these fools don't know me because that's not what I do. And this was my response to their long comment. Whoever it was followed up with more insults and claimed that since I didn't respond to the points in his long comment, that he had schooled me. Once again, showing he doesn't know who the fuck he's dealing with. I don't do the long-ass speech on other people's comment pages thing. I take you to school on camera. So let's look at what this so-called Globebuster claimed in his comment thread manifesto. He invokes the free expansion of gas law, which someone briefly mentioned in the video. He says gas disperses immediately into space. At one point in the video, I think they said instantly, and therefore does no work. And no work means no propulsion. Okay, this is what he's trying to claim with the free expansion gas law. This is the display that usually is presented with the free expansion gas law. It's right there on Wikipedia. For those of you who don't like Wikipedia, that's too bad. This Globebuster references Wikipedia articles in his comments, so it's wholly acceptable here. You have this system that consists of these two chambers separated by this divider. The entire system is these two chambers. One is a vacuum, one is filled with a gas at some pressure. The free expansion gas law says if you open this divider, the gas will expand to fill the other chamber until equilibrium is reached. And importantly, since the system's volume is kept constant, no work can be done on its surroundings. And that's true, but we're not dealing with the free expansion gas law with the rocket the way these busters think. The free expansion gas law is for an isolated system and is saying that that system can do no work outside the system affecting its surroundings. These buster guys want to think of a rocket and space like these chambers, this being the rocket and this being space. But no, that's not the setup. This is the rocket and this is space. Note that if the free expansion gas law is in effect, the expanding of the gas from this rocket can do no work outside of the system. Outside of the system. The free expansion gas law does not say no work happens within the system, though. In fact, it says the opposite. Here, in a footnote to the section that says no work is done to the system's surroundings, it says, note that the fact that the gas expands in a vacuum and thus against zero pressure is irrelevant. The work done by the system would also be zero if the right-hand side of the chamber were not evacuated, but instead filled with a gas at a lower pressure. While the expanded gas would then do work against the gas in the right-hand side of the container, the whole system doesn't do any work against the environment. So it seems inside the system, work can be done. And the rocket is inside the system. Sure, the expansion of the gases from the rocket won't do any work that affects whatever is surrounding our universe, but it can do work on the rocket itself. Also, note that the free expansion gas law works without a full vacuum, just a pressure difference, which brings up a refutation to the claim that when an opening is made allowing the higher pressure volume to expand into the lower pressure or vacuum volume, that the gases would escape instantly. Well, if that were the case, how is it possible to fill a vacuum chamber slowly? You have a vacuum chamber. We've all seen this happen before. So you've got this vacuum chamber and it's as close to a vacuum as it's capable of. And you have an air tank with a valve. Why is it you can open up that valve and slowly fill the vacuum chamber? If the free expansion gas law acts like you claim it does, Globebuster, why, when you crack open that valve and an opening is made, why doesn't all of the gas in the tank instantly fill the vacuum chamber to the point of equilibrium? That's because the free expansion gas law doesn't say that the gases move at infinite frictionless speed to fill the space. Let me be clear in summing up what I've shown here. When you so-called Globebusters invoke the free expansion gas law, you don't know what the fuck you are talking about. Globebuster then repeats the false claim that rockets need a medium, which I've already covered. He writes in all caps and writes period at the end, but that doesn't make it any more valid. There's nothing in Newton's third law that says a medium is required. This is him making up a rule himself. He then repeats his claim about the gun and compares the gunpowder to the fuel, and I went over that already as well. And then he does this little bit about the rocket engine nozzles. They had briefly mentioned nozzles a couple times, and he tries to make a point about it here. He quotes from Wikipedia. The optimal size of a rocket engine nozzle to be used within the atmosphere is achieved when the exit pressure equals ambient atmospheric pressure, which decreases with increasing altitude. For rockets traveling from the Earth to orbit, a simple nozzle design is only optimal at one altitude, losing efficiency and wasting fuel at other altitudes. He then adds his summation. What this means, Mr. Lesser Sapien, is that the rocket nozzle venturi must be reduced in order to accelerate the expanding gases sufficiently into what is left of the atmosphere at high altitude. Okay, that seems reasonable. But then he adds, when the rocket is in 10 to the negative 17 torr vacuum, the gases are immediately dispersed into the infinite and expanding vacuum of space, which is not what the entry is saying, and I've already gone over. Immediate dispersion is not a claim based in fact. Now I'm just going to gloss over the fact that he tried to use a resource reference to craft going into orbit around the Earth to support his flat Earth claims. And look at what he's trying to do here. He seems to think that simple nozzle design being only optimal at one altitude means no rockets can work in space. Like you only have two choices, optimal or can't do it. But like most agenda-driven anti-science hacks, he only brought up information that he felt fit his narrative, from the very same Wikipedia page he just referenced. In a multi-stage design, the second stage rocket engine is primarily designed for use at high altitudes, only providing additional thrust after the first stage engine performs the initial liftoff. In this case, designers will usually opt for an overexpanded nozzle, overexpanded if it were at sea level, design for the second stage, making it more efficient at higher altitudes, where the ambient pressure is lower. And it adds, for nozzles that are used in vacuum or at very high altitude, it is impossible to match ambient pressure. Rather, nozzles with larger area ratio are usually more efficient. However, a very long nozzle has significant mass, a drawback in and of itself. A length that optimizes overall vehicle performance typically has to be found. So, the very resource that this cankersaur tried to use against the use of rocket nozzles in space explains that engineers use, their brains to design nozzles that get the job done. But for some reason, he didn't mention that. He then repeats his misinterpretation of the free expansion gas law, not understanding that no work applies to the system, applying no work outside of the system. But he uses all caps, and that makes it more valid, right? But during this hissy fit, he writes something that I think very clearly shows his misunderstanding of Newton's third law in this scenario. He writes, "You mistake the purpose of the propellant as what is being worked against, when in fact its purpose is to accelerate the gas against the atmosphere, which will produce an equal but opposite reaction and push back, thus giving the rocket forward momentum." He says the purpose of the accelerant is to accelerate the gas against the atmosphere. No, the accelerant is the gas. It's not accelerating the gas, it's accelerating itself. And for some reason, some magical limitation, this guy thinks that the expanding gas is capable of pushing against an atmosphere, but is not capable of pushing against the rocket. They are trying to say that these small gas particles can't have enough mass to move the rocket without pushing on an atmosphere. But the expanding gas generates X amount of force, period. That's how much it makes. Having atmosphere to push on doesn't make it generate more force. There's no magic magnification. It pushes against the small particles of the atmosphere with the same force it pushes against the large mass of the rocket. The mass of the air it could push is nothing. The mass that's doing all the work is the mass of the gas itself, which is not a little bit of mass. Stage 3 of the Saturn V rocket, the stage that actually fires in space, sheds some 425 metric tons of fuel in 6 minutes. That's over a metric ton of mass being shed each second. That's not much mass. The payload is only 90 metric tons. A metric ton each second isn't significant mass? You don't really think these things through much, do you? Whoever this fool is, he finishes up his exchange with more personal insults because he's writing on his own comment page and that's what his flunkies like to see. He says, I've been lied to about pretty much everything in my life and I should help them fight these wrongs. He says he schooled me twice and answered all the points of my video in depth, but like a drunken karaoke singer who really believes he rocked the house, this Globebuster basically pissed himself and passed out while singing the chorus to Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba at the top of his lungs. Globebusters, your debunk was shit. Fighting you is futile because you're like Edward Norton in Fight Club, beating the shit out of yourself in the parking lot. I don't have to do anything for you to fail except get out of your way. Your own words sing of your failure, your casual laughter at facts, your tortured misconstruing of the laws of physics, your cherry picking of references, your lies of omission, and your reliance on ad hominem attacks speaks to the dearth of scientific integrity amongst you so-called truth seekers. Your level of prideful ignorance is shocking, but I'm unconcerned because you're even more impotent than you are stupid. I could go on, but I think I've said all that needs to be said. Good talk.
That's my job! That's what I do! I don't lose! I win! Is there no one on this planet to even challenge me?
Maybe you came by to congratulate me on last night's victory.
Man, that was fun. Wasn't that fun? That was fun.